In today's video, we are bringing you a no-fluff DIY. We're gonna go step by step to show you how to install this massive pure 800 turbo on a B58 340. Hey, this is Bryan. Thanks for watching Kies Motorsports. If you like our videos, give us a thumbs up, make sure to subscribe, and check us out at kiesmotorsports.com. That is right, in today's video, we are going to bring you a no-fluff DIY, show you step by step how to install this amazing pure 800 turbo on Chris's F30 340. Now, if you have another car with the B58, like a 440, for example, it's the exact same process. If you have an M340, maybe like a 2019 or newer, it's the same process pretty much, but we do have a dedicated DIY that we will link for you down below if you are interested in watching this process on your car. Now, just to set an expectation for today, like I said, it's going to be no fluff. So we are going to start by removing some components like the intake, the charge pipe. We're going to drain some fluids. Then from there, we are going to give you a side-by-side comparison of the stock turbo and this beautiful pure 800. And then we're going to show you how to install it, torque it down, and refill your fluids and call it a day. Now, if you are looking for tuning, you're going to have to subscribe to come back for another day because we have a dyno day set up with Mr. Kerry Jordan, and we're going to see how much power we can pull out of this car. So without further ado, let's get started. And again, if you're looking for a specific part of this video, be sure to see the timestamps below. Last thing I want to say is we're getting about 10 trees cut down. So we are trying to do clips between chainsawing. It's just Chainsaw City if you can hear it right now. So please excuse any chainsawing and let's get started. First part of the process, we need to get some things out of the way. I'm going to take off our engine cover. This just pulls up like so. When you go to reinstall it, it just pops right back on. There are these 4 little grommets. If one gets a little bit screwy like this one does here, just pop it out and then press it back in, and then it's gonna go on with ease. All right, on Chris's car, we have an Mst Intake. Whether you have an Mst Intake or a stock intake, it's a very similar process. You're going to just take a driver and you just turn that a little bit to release the clip. Then you're going to press in on this gray tab. It's going to release the clip, and then you can pull off the sensor for your mass airflow. Now, if you happen to have an Mst Intake, you're going to need to remove these little screws. And I think when we go to reinstall this, we should install one of those cool new clear ones, the clear covers, and see if Chris notices. Once you've done that, you can set the top of your heat shield out of the way and remove the filter with a flathead. Okay, then you can release your hose clamp down here, which separates the intake from the inlet. And once you get that nice and loose, we can get this piece of our intake out. Okay, just like that. Then take a deep well 16, slide this over like that. We're gonna remove this, and that piece is gonna come out just like that. Then with a 10 on the top and a 10 on the bottom, there's a little nut and bolt that goes through here. Then with that nut and bolt removed, you can just take this heat shield and the intake is out of the way. Okay, so now we have the intake out. Let's remove this inlet here. It's pretty easy to do. There are just 3 things I want to disconnect. There is the PCV hose. You can disconnect it down there. It's a little bit pain, so it's easier to do it once it's already off the car. Then we have a connection in the way that's going to have to get removed anyway on our wastegate, which is under this little blanket thing. And then our PCV heating element connection, so we're gonna have to remove that as well. So let's start at the top and work our way down. So the way that these clips work, there is a little rib section on the top and on the bottom. You press that in and wiggle, and what that does, if you look in here, there's a little catch right there, and there's a little catch right there. So it starts out oval, and then as you press that in, it's going to make it a circle. It's going to extract these clips and make it so that you can slide that off. Okay, so then I can disconnect this little connection from there. And then over here, protecting your wastegate, there's this little heat shield. It's held in with 3 snaps. So just undo that. And then you can pull this out, set that to the side. And then just like when we removed that mass airflow sensor, it has this little grayish piece that sticks out. Just take a flathead, move that back. That's going to release the clip. And then you press down on it, and then that'll slide off. Now that you're a pro with these clips, we're going to do the exact same thing here. Sometimes if you use one of these pick tools and whatnot, you can kind of pull it out and press down at the same time, and it just makes it come off super, super easy. So now that that's done, we can get this and just tuck that out of the way. Next, we need to release this vacuum line over here. This is the same style clip as we saw on the PCV, where it has the rib section. that you press on each side, and then it's going to release the clips. However, this one is kind of a pain because it's in a terrible location. A lot of times it's easiest if you disconnect the top one first because you actually have a little bit of room, and then you're able to maneuver this a little bit to get a better position to remove that. So, probably not gonna be able to see much, but I'm gonna reach in here and I will disconnect the one on the top, pull that off, and then once you've done that, you can see that you have a little bit more wiggle room to get this other one, just like that. Okay, so now that you have done all of that, you have one more little C-clip right there that we need to pull out, and then the inlet will pop off. So take your favorite pick tool, just line it up like that, and then this isn't going to come off all the way. You can pull it off if you want, but you only need to release it just like that, and then just give it a little wiggle. Okay, and then pull that off. And just so I don't lose it, I'm gonna clip that back into place. Now that we have the inlet off of the car, I wanna show you how to get the PCV off. It's pretty simple to do. It's a little easier to do off the car, so just remove that heat shield. It's just snapped on, so super easy. When you look at this, there is a little clip on this side, and there's a little clip on this side. So basically you just need to press in on both sides, and then this will pop out. So just keep wiggling back and forth. Pop, there it is. All right, so at this part of the process, we are ready to remove the charge pipe. We have an aftermarket FTP charge pipe on Chris's car, which is 2 parts. So we don't really need to remove the entire thing. So we're just going to remove the lower section. If you're curious how to install one of these, it's a pretty straightforward process, but we do have a video. We'll link it down below for you. But basically, there are just 3 other bolts over here. You have 2 sensors, and that's pretty much it. You just disconnect that, slide it off, and then pop this new one on. So because ours is just 2 parts and we're going for no fluff here, we're just going to loosen this clamp right here. Just like on the inlet, we need to remove our C-clip. So I'm gonna try to do this and stay out of your way as much as possible. We'll just get in here, wiggle this up like that. Okay, so then you can just slide this off like so. Now with mine, I'm just going to wiggle it out of the coupler, and then I'll pull that up just like that. Next thing we're going to do is we are going to disconnect our downpipe. It's held in with this 13mm bolt, which attaches this V-band in. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put my socket on here. We are going to loosen it. Then I'm going to spread the clamp and put it on the downpipe. Now, typically when we do this installation, we drop the exhaust, we get the downpipe out of the way. However, I've heard several people say that it's possible to do it while leaving the downpipe in. So today, we're gonna see if we can do it. Worst case, we just have to take the downpipe off. It's not really that big of a deal. So yeah, so let's see if we can leave it on, and we'll continue. So that you can see what's going on here, there's a nut at the back, and then there's a bolt on this side, and the band holds the nut in place. Now sometimes if it's too compressed, the nut won't be spinning, and you just press on the back here to pop that up. I don't have that problem right now, but what we want to do is make sure that we get this nice and loose. So what I'm just holding the nut in place. It's actually spinning pretty easy. We always recommend having new clamps and gaskets whenever you're replacing turbos and downpipes, that kind of stuff. Okay, once you have that nice and loose, I'm going to spread it with my hand. I'm just going to shimmy it over onto the downpipe so that we can get that loose. What we're going to do is disconnect our O2 sensors. So just press down and pull that off. And then same on the other side. Okay, just press down on this little clip and then that'll pull it off. Make sure that it is pulled out all the way. And then once you do that, you can just pull them down here and just let them hang out of the way. Now it's heat shield time. We need to remove this heat shield here in order to get to some of the nuts that secure the turbo on. So take your 13mm that you used to get that V-band clamp off, and you can remove these bolts. Okay. So when you look at it, there's 5 holes, but ours didn't have one in there, as you can see by the indentation. So you just have 3 in the front and then 1 in the back, and then this piece will pull off with ease. All right, at this point in the process, we are ready to remove our oil and our coolant lines. Now, we like to just drain all of the engine oil anyway when we're doing turbos. We figure if you're gonna put a turbo on, you might as well at least change the oil. So we are going to put the car up in the air, drain the oil, and then when we remove the one coolant line, you're gonna lose a ton of coolant. We learned that on Edwin's M340i and Bill's A90 Supra, so be sure to be ready for that. You will see that we are using a lift. You do not need a lift to do this job. You can do it with a jack and jack stands. I think when we did Bill's turbo, I want to say we just did it on ramps. We didn't even use the lift, even though we had it in the background. But anyway, so we are going to do that. I'm not sure if I said this or not. Use common sense. Do not do this job when your turbo is hot, or you will burn the crap out of your hand, because that's where all of the hottest gases go. They go right into that turbo. So make sure that your car is cool to touch before doing any of this. To make sure that our fluids flow as good as possible, we're just gonna vent the caps, just untwist it, and just put it on the side just like that. We'll do the same over here as well. All right, now with the car in the air, we can see the underbody protection, which is held in by 3,000 of these little 8 mils. So at this time, let's go around the perimeter, and there's a couple just here in the middle, and remove the underbody protection. Be very careful when you're lowering it down that you don't get junk in your eyes. It's a good idea to wear glasses when doing this. Correction, there's only 22. Now, if you were just doing this turbo in your home and you were not filming it, you could reach up and you could get those lines off the turbo. Technically, you could even do it, just reaching under the turbo. I want you guys to see what we're doing. So I'm going to remove the stiffening plate. So it's held in with a bunch of, I think, 13s. Yes, there's a bunch of 13 mils, and then there's also some 8 mils in the back. You can either take off this entire piece or just take out a couple of these 8 mils and rock it down, because there are some 13 mils that are hiding behind it. Okay, and then once you've done the 8s, we are going to remove the 13s. Typically what I like to do is I like to leave 1 or 2 of the middle ones, do the perimeter first, and then that way it kind of holds it in place and it's not gonna, put any pressure on it or anything. All right, now that we have all of this removed, we are going to remove the oil line, which is this big one on the bottom here. So you'll see that it goes into the block over here with a T30, and then there's another T30 straight up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the one from the block first, the T30, and then I'm going to remove the one at the top. Typically, you won't have any real oil come out of here, maybe a couple drops. It's the coolant that comes out like the flood. So let me reach up here and I'll remove the bottom T30. It's pretty tight. Okay. Once you get it broken loose, I like to just use the bit. A little less awkward. Okay, now let's go straight up, and I'll get the other one. Okay, and then a lot of times these are pretty tough to get out. Don't like them. All right, here we go. All right, I was able to disconnect it from the turbo. Once you get one side out, it does make it a little bit easier. Just remember which side goes where. So this side here goes into the block. I'm just gonna take a Sharpie and write B on it for block. It's kind of just like a blob. I guess I should get a fine tip Sharpie sometime. I'm gonna go throw this on the table. Something very important, you always want to replace all of your O-rings. So if you disconnect something, you need to make sure that you replace those O-rings. Otherwise, you could have a leak and you're not gonna wanna have to do all this again. Now this is pretty easy to get to, but some of the other lines, especially the ones like the oil lines that go behind the turbo, pain in the butt. So make sure you do it right. Now that we have that oil line removed, we need to remove some of the coolant lines. This is easiest to do with the car lower. It's easier access from the top. When you're doing this, you need some kind of large container. You are going to spill a ton of coolant. And again, that's why we're not doing it from under the car, because I don't want to get wet. So if you look over here, you can see the two coolant lines. They're both held in with one T30, so I'm going to loosen this, wiggle those out, and then it's going to get crazy. Sometimes what helps if you take a flathead and you just kind of help yourself pry a little bit. Just be careful to not mess up the aluminum or anything. I'm just gonna get a towel around it just for better grip. And then I should be able to, there we go. So now we're gonna get some rags, just in case we have any drippage. You may have noticed that there is another line connected into the turbo for the coolant. We're gonna leave that connected because it's connected to the block over there. So we are just going to disconnect it over there, and then we'll just take it out all as one piece. And there's also the oil line over here as well. Again, it's T30. So just take this over here. Pop that one loose. We'll just pop this one loose while we're over here, while we're in the neighborhood. And we'll take this out. I'm gonna use my trusty flathead to gently pry this out. Okay, this one's working a million times better than the last one. All right. So a little coolant dripping there, and then we have our oil line. Okay, so now that we are this far, we're pretty much ready to take the turbo off. So there are some lines that are going to still be attached to the turbo. When you go to take the turbo out, do not hold by the wastegate unless you want to damage it. That's going to be really bad. So we have 7 bolts. They're a 10 mil, so there's one here, 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 and just goes all the way across. And then there's this little squiggly piece of metal that goes on top. Once you remove that, the turbo will actually rock out of this this bottom plate here. Don't take it off. There's no need to. It's not going to do anything. We're going to take that off, and then from there, take out the gasket and swap the wastegate over and call it a day. So with that, I'm going to start with the most difficult to reach. All right, so at this point, we just have one of those nuts and studs holding the entire turbo on, which is plenty because it's not really supporting all the weight. There is a support brace underneath that we need to get off. Now, typically, what I would do if I wasn't filming is I would just reach down here and I would remove it. However, you're not gonna be able to see what I'm doing. So we are going to put the car up in the air, and then there's 2 bolts, I believe they're E-Torques. Then we're going to remove those, put the car back down, take out that bolt, and then the turbo will be free. All right, so now we are ready to take out those 2 E-Torques bits. So as you can see, I just take a really long extension and go through the wheel well. And then that way you guys will be able to see from underneath what's going on. The one that you're seeing right now is the bolt to the right, and then there is one to the left. So I'm gonna break that one loose. Okay, so then you're going to remove the other one. Okay, and I forgot to tell you what size it was. It is a T45. So Torx 45, boom, number 2. Okay, and then this other one's kind of a pain in the butt. We need to loosen it. Let's see if we can get it. But it's basically the other bolt. Sounded promising.
How you shattered your bit.
That was tight. All right, so as you saw, my E-Torques broke, the only one that fit. So it is now time to improvise. So what I have here, I have another T45, and my ratchet is just a little bit too big to get on the back. So I grabbed a 5/16, and what I'm gonna try to do is I'm going to try to get it, get this on there, and then push on it with something. I'll probably start with the rag if I'm gonna have the leverage, but I can try to also push with the end of my hammer here. So let me grab a rag, and then I'm gonna throw this on there, and then we'll see if we can make it work. All right, with my new amazing tool, I have 0 grip from the bottom. So we're going to lower the car down, and then I'm going to reach down and then pull up on it and see if I can get it that way. the head of the bolt off. Dang it, Chris. I just sheared the head of the bolt off with this. Welcome to Kies Uncut. Sorry, I said no fluff. I lied. All right, so what I'm going to do, hopefully you don't have to do this too. I'm gonna have to just bend this bracket off a little bit, and then once it's off the car, it's drilling the car. So basically right now I have this piece. We took the 2 bolts out here. We took this bolt out, but we sheared the bolt, but it's preventing the turbo from going down. So I have to take this bracket off, and then we rock the turbo down. So I'm just gonna have to just spread this a little bit like that. So I just stuck this tool in there, spread it, and then we're gonna have to get that out, tap it, or just drill it out and use a nut and bolt before we proceed. But yeah. All right, let's just remove this last nut bolt combo. Okay, take that off, put it there. Okay. And what you have to do is just watch out for that coolant line. It's kind of in a terrible spot. Okay. Look how insane this turbo looks. That looks crazy compared to this. So let's get ready to install. But before we do, let me show you the other side too. All right, on the downpipe side, give you another little spin here, no charge. But look how tiny the wheel is. And then over here, look how massive it is. So if you aren't familiar with pure turbos, what they do is you send in a core, or you pay a core fee, and they actually take a stock OEM turbo and they make it into this monstrosity. So this literally is this. And once we're done with this turbo will get sent into Pure, and Pure will do their magic and make it into one of these guys. So cool thing about Pure is you get OEM fitment. Why? Well, it's an OEM turbo. And now the coolest thing about the turbos, you get big turbo performance with limited lag because it's not insanely big, but you get an OEM package, so you're not rerouting coolant lines, you're not rerouting oil lines. Everything's just OEM. All you do is just replace all the gaskets and then plug it back in. So that being said, you can see that I have a couple lines that I need to swap over. One of the most important things you need to do when doing turbos is really important that you get oil flow to the turbo. We have this product from Liquimoly. It is a turbocharger additive. Basically what this is it helps you get oil to your turbo immediately. It's a thicker oil that is going to stay pretty much where you put it. It's very safe for these turbos. And then once you start running your car, it just blends in with your oil and it's fine to use. But the cool thing is you're not going to fry a turbo on your first start because you just squirt this thing in there. Well, not there, that's the coolant side. But you squirt it into the oil side, and then from there, it just sits where it needs to go. Everything is well lubricated, and then by that time, the car is pumping fresh oil through the system, and then you're lubricated, so you're fine. You're not gonna burn anything up. So very good to have. It's a very cheap insurance policy. We'll have it linked below for you. But yeah, one-time use, squirt it in, and you're done. Okay, first step of transferring everything over, we have our wastegate. We need to move it over to this side. I'm just gonna take my flathead screwdriver and release this little clip here. There we go. Now we need a T20, and there are 4 T20s that hold the wastegate actuator onto the turbo. So we're just gonna take this. So now you can lift that up. And this whole thing is gonna slide out like that. Transfer it over. Put that there.
Now, when you're tightening these, they do have a torque spec. It's super low though. It's like 4 Newton meters or something crazy. It's just snug them up. You don't have to go crazy tight. You don't want to crack the plastic. As you can tell by the massive size, they can't take much torque anyway. So we just snug them up. I like to use a smaller tool like this. And the reason for that is because if you have, you know, a big ratchet or whatever, it's much easier to apply a lot more torque. So this gives me a better feel of how tight they are, and then try to do it in an X pattern when you're tightening them. Then I'm going to take my C-clip, and I'm just going to try to push it on. Okay, snaps on just like that, and that is good to go. Next thing we need to do, you will see we got a slew of BMW parts, different gaskets and whatnot. You want to make sure that you replace all of these, because if you go through this whole process and then you have a leak, it's a royal pain to undo it and then fix a little O-ring. So it's better to just spend I don't know, it's like 150 bucks for all the little knick-knack things that you need. But you just spend the money once and then you're good to go. So this thing is pretty corroded and nasty anyway. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this off. I'm going to clean it up. I'm going to put new O-rings on and then swap it over. You'll see that some of the lines are on the turbo and some of the lines are still on the car. So what we're going to do with that, we're just going to obviously just swap over everything that's here. And then once we get it on, we'll do a final tightening. I did grind this off. That was that bolt that sheared off. I haven't fully ripped it off yet. There we go. So I do need to find a nut and bolt for this. And once again, this goes like, it's oriented like this. It's kind of strange when you look at it, all the numbers and everything are upside down. But this is going to go, I'll show you on the old turbo. This is going to go right like that. So I'm going to get a new nut and bolt, and then I'll be able to tighten that down good. And then it has those other, I believe E45 bolts that hold this into place.
At this point, we're pretty much ready to put the turbo on. We just need to swap out a couple gaskets and whatnot. So if you look over here, first off, make sure that you pull the old gasket off and make sure that you note which way that it goes. Now, typically, if you look at it, there's going to be some font, like part numbers and whatnot. They're going to be right side up. In the package from BMW, it typically comes the other way, which doesn't make any sense. So just make sure that you take your gasket off and line it up with your new one. Also, I already pulled it out. Be careful with your eyes with this. You can see it, like if I jiggle it, it snows. You don't want any of these metal particles in your eyes. Your downpipe has this little groove, and with the B58, you need to get a new gasket, and you just take it like this, and you just press it in. So very easy to do. I made a decision to leave the downpipe in. We've gone this far with it, so we're just gonna leave it in. The other thing that I did is I replaced this gasket. Again, you want to replace all of your gaskets. It's not worth the trouble and the fuss to actually go back and fix any of that. So before we actually install the turbo, I'm going to put the new gasket in, which I have right over here. So once again, you want to take your gasket and make sure that you line it up. Make sure that everything is in the correct orientation. What I like to do is I like to trace this with a pen, and then you will notice that we have the torquing sequence. So it goes 7, 5, 3, 1, 2, 4, 6. Nice thing is there's only 7 nuts that need to be torqued down. BMW recommends that you go through the order, so 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. And you do it twice to 10 Newton meters, and then you go back over them 3 more times to 16 Newton meters. So you go 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. You do that twice, and then you torque them down to 16 Newton meters 3 times through the sequence. So with that, let's get our new gasket. Push it up. There are these little alignment pins that will make sure that everything is going in
correct way. So if you look right there, that's one of the pins. There's one on this side, and then there's one on the opposite side. All right, so again, make sure you're not holding it by the wastegate. Just lower it down here. It's so nice that you can do this. Super nice. And I'm gonna fish my line here to where it needs to go. It's gonna pull that line through like that. Then you're gonna take your turbo, you press it up, and it's gonna sit into that groove just like that, so you can really just let go of it at that point. Make sure that the front and rear are all in the groove, and then makes it nice because it kind of takes the weight off of things. So then we are going to look for number 1 here. So it's right in the middle. 1, 2, 3, 4. This one right there. So take your support bracket, we'll call it. Put this on. And then we'll torque this down to 10 Newton meters. Just make sure that it's pressed all the way back. And then I'll hand do the other ones. I'll do the rest to 10. We'll go to 10 again. And then we'll go 3 times to 16 Newton meters. All right, so at this point, I'm going to just reinstall my upper coolant line here. Just gonna wiggle this in. And then anytime you have one of these, so this is what I'm going to thread through there. It's also what you're going to find over on the block and in the back and whatnot. These are always torqued down to 8 Newton meters. So just something to keep in mind. So I'll just throw this in here. I'll torque it down to 8. All right, so that's torqued down to 8 Newton meters. This one's a little bit finicky. Whenever you have 2 coolant lines or 2 oil lines or whatever, it's 2 coolant lines, they overlap where you have to put the bolt through. So just make sure that you just take your time and just line that up. Otherwise, if your bottom piece is a little bit shifted, sometimes you'll feel a little block. You just have to just mess with the lines a little bit. But that's in. While I'm at it, I am going to replace that T30 back here that I removed. It's really tight to see. It's just a support piece. So I'm just gonna go ahead and do that. Okay, so now what we're going to do, we have our 2 lines that are down under. I'm gonna take these, pop that in, and I'm gonna do the same with the bottom one. They pretty much only go one place. If you manage to mix them up, you're special. Once you get these in, I just gotta push this top one in a little better. We're going to reinstall our favorite little T30s here. Nice thing about the B58 is for all the T30s, they use 1. For like the S55, they use 3 different ones. And, you know, different lengths have different washers. BMW's like, yeah, let's just get 1. That's fine. That's the way to do it. Thanks, BMW. You're great. All right, so then I'm gonna torque these down to 8 Newton meters. 1. Perfect. Now, when you go to reinstall the lower portion of your charge pipe, whether it is aftermarket or OEM, you can actually just clip it on like that. Make sure that it's fully engaged. Make sure that if yours has a little lip on this side, that this little bend goes away. Otherwise, it'll get hung up and it won't actually do anything. But the way that these work, you know, from BMW or aftermarket, you can engage the clip and then you'll hear an audible click once everything is snapped into place. So I'm gonna drop this down here, feed it up. And again, if you're doing this with a stock charge pipe, you just have to take the top off. So it's pretty easy. Okay, so now let's listen for an audible click. Okay, if you heard that, it was like a ting ting. That's a technical term. Reinstall the lower portion of our charge pipe. All right, so what I'm gonna do now is I'm just gonna hit this with some parts cleaner. I got a little of my Liquid Moly anti-turbo seize stuff on there. Okay, it's now time to install the pure inlet. Just so you know, it does not come with a hose clamp right here. We're just putting one on just so it doesn't go anywhere. Most people don't run it, but I just wanna make sure that this thing is extra awesome. So when you do this, you wanna make sure that this piece right here for the PCV is above the wastegate. It gets a little tight down there, so just something to keep in mind as you're going. Also, we're gonna have to get this on here. It is, again, a little bit tight, so do not be surprised. Okay, so I'm gonna take this and wiggle it. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start with this down below because it makes it a lot easier. I'll wiggle this on. I actually need to loosen my clamp a little bit. I put it too tight. Okay, now with this, sorry, I'm gonna be going back and forth a little bit. This is going to get clipped into there. Make sure that you hear that clip. And then as I said before, you can't have that down below. You're gonna have to pull that up. Otherwise, your line it's not gonna work out. You don't have enough space. So at this point, we twist this, and the good thing is it is silicone, so you do have a little flexibility. And it gets a little caught up on the wastegate. As you can see, it's not gonna work like that, so you gotta keep twisting. Another reason to have a hose clamp handy, just so everything goes on a little bit easier. Okay, so now I'm gonna tighten down my flathead over here. Just a little bit awkward of an angle. All right, so then you're gonna take this side of the PCV. You're gonna pop this in here, and then this is going to clip in there, just like that. All right, so I just wiggled it in so that it's that far, and then everything fits pretty good. Again, there's no hose clamp included. If you want to add one, it's not an issue. So you are welcome to do that if you want. So now I'm going to take a small connection that goes here. This goes there. And this one goes over, it goes onto your wastegate actuator. This one is for your mass airflow sensor. Make sure you double check everything. Make sure you don't drop anything in there, that would be bad. Okay, so that looks good. Everything looks good. All right, it's time to take off our silicone hose here from the OEM inlet. I'm going to install it on our pure inlet. If you are doing this with an OEM intake, it's the changes and the differences are they're very subtle. It's not anything crazy. So before I finish putting the intake back together, there's a couple things just so you know what we're gonna do. We're gonna pull the downpipe up. If you look down there, the downpipes always have a bracket and it goes over those two bolts. So basically I'm gonna pull it up, slide it onto the turbo, put the V-band on, and then we'll go back and we'll tighten those down. You wanna make sure your V-band connection is solid before you do anything. And then from there, we have to connect the O2 sensors, put the heat shield back here, and then put the intake back in. And then just a couple odds and ends, and then we're pretty much done. So it's, as far as turbos go, the B58 is awesome. The G20 is a little easier than this, and the Supra is easier as well, but not by much. I mean, still it's very, 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 very manageable. So I'm gonna pop this up. So then once you have it close, take your V-band, pop it up and over, make sure that it's on both sides, and make sure you put this down because you don't want it to get in the way of the wastegate. So I'm gonna have it like right there. And then remember there's a nut on the other side, so what I'm doing is I'm pulling back on the bolt as I tighten it. Otherwise it's gonna move around and get funky. Okay, then we can tighten that down. Now that I've done that, I'm reinstalling the two 13 mils on the downpipe hanger bracket. Now it's heat shield time, so we have our little heat shield we need to reinstall. Make sure that you put it on the correct way. It actually goes like that. So this is gonna slide over the turbo, and then with these bolts, they're 13 mil, and they get torqued down to 19 Newton meters. So here we go. All right, it's time for our little heat shield blanket thing. the hardest part of the whole job, right here. You can do this. You can do anything. All right. Okay, now we're gonna take our heat shield. Drop this down there, just like that. And then we're gonna hand thread this guy on. Okay, then with our Mst Intake. Put this nut and bolt through here. It's important to use the most obnoxious extension that you have. Okay, make sure your clamp is lined up so that you can get to it. The small part feeds through here. And then the big part goes into the inlet. This does take a little bit of maneuvering to be able to get everything to go in nice. You gotta remember you are working with aftermarket that's connected to aftermarket. So sometimes it takes a little more work to get stuff done. Once you've done that, we can tighten our clamp up to seal up any of those air gaps. Okay, take our mass airflow, plug that in, pop our filter on. Chris is almost ready for the racetrack. Okay, with your O2 sensors, make sure that they are clipped in. Down there. This one goes here. And it slides into this. And this one's kind of busted. But anyway, this one clips into here, like this. And then this one slides back like that. And as far as the engine bay, let's just give it one more glance. We have the heat shield, but I want to keep it off in the beginning because it's going to sound really cool and I want to hear it. So we're going to do that. But now we can go up. There's still an oil line that we need to do on the turbo. We still have to do that support bracket and then put together some of the other things like the underbody protection. I just wanted to limit the up and down of the car. So let's take these tools off and then go under the car and keep going. All right, so at this point we need to install our bracket. Again, most pieces go and get installed with the writing right side up. With this piece, the writing's upside down. So what we're gonna do, I'm gonna put these Torx bolts back in. They get torqued down to 19 Newton meters. And then again, I had to snap that bolt off, so I have another nut and bolt that we're going to put through there and we're gonna tighten that up. So this is gonna be really hard for you to see, but we'll see what we can show you. Tighten up my new bolt here. I will say I think it's actually easier with the nut and bolt than it was with that other one that sheared off. All right, that's good to go. So now it is time to put our oil line back in, and then I want to just hit the bottom of the turbo again with some parts cleaner just to make sure there's no extra oil or anything on there. So let's head over to the table over here, and we have our oil line. Remember I did that amazing B earlier with the fattest Sharpie in the world. That was for block. So I'm gonna navigate it up. We're gonna stick that into the block, and then this is going to go into the turbo end, and then we have our little T30s again, and these get torqued down, both of them, to 8 Newton meters. All right, so while we're this far, we are going to change the oil, as I mentioned earlier. Typically I drain it in the beginning, but you don't really leak all that much oil, so I figure, you know what, we'll just wait till the end. Just make sure that you have filters and all on hand. We still have our cap vented up above, so we should get some decent flow. Just make sure that you take off the old crush washer and replace it with a new one. We typically use BMW OEM filters for this car, and then we have Liqui Moly 5W30 that we're going to be filling the car with. So I'm gonna open up one of our oil filter kits and I'll show you that new crush washer. In the oil filter kit, there's this ring, which I'm gonna show you where that goes, has your filter, and then a brand new crush washer. I'm just gonna throw that on there. And then once that's done draining, we are going to torque it down to 24.9 Newton meters.
All right, at this point, let's change out the oil filter.
All right, it's oil filter time. So the oil filter is down there. It's just this plastic cap we need to remove. There are these little tabs here. So you push them towards the driver's side, and then that will enable you to relocate. The size that we use on this is 1.25 inches, which is massive. The reason that we use the standard instead of using the actual metric is because you're gonna find this. You're gonna find 1.25 inches in your average mechanic set. So it's the most common size and it fits snug. And I have no concerns that it's going to round out or anything. Now before I get this too far off, I'm gonna throw a towel down here just to make sure you're not dripping. All right, get another rag. Unless you like to get oily. Pull this up through here. That worst placement ever, BMW. Spill a little bit there. When you look at the filter, pay attention to how it goes in. So you can see we have the end with the O-ring. When you look at this, there's an end with an O-ring, and then there's a small side. So what we're gonna do, you're gonna take this, and if you just give it a little 90-degree twist, if that, it's gonna help it to come out a lot easier. Before I put the new one in, I do wanna switch out our little gasket here. So it sits right here. So pop it up, put it there. Make sure that you are putting it in the correct location. Don't accidentally put it on the threads. It might get a little bit funky. Okay. So now with some fresh oil, you want to put it on the seal. It's going to make sure that it seals properly and then it goes on easy. Put that there so I don't spill it. And then you're going to drop this in with this end and just give it a little twist to lock it in place. Then once you've done that, you're not spilling any more oil, so you can pull your rag out. Drop this in here, navigate it into place, hand twist it to make sure that it's going in right, and then we're going to torque that to 24.9 Newton meters. All right, so for Chris's car, especially because we have a tune and a big turbo, we're using the Liquid Moly 5W30 Special Tech, which we have everything linked for you down below. And he needs 6.9 quarts of oil. And once you've done that, you can reinstall your cap. All right, so now what we are going to do is we are going to top off Chris's coolant with a 50-50 blend of BMW coolant and then also distilled water. As you can see, I like to keep a giant reservoir of it. So I know that I have plenty. I'm using a vacuum bleeder. So basically the way that this works is I put it on here. We'll probably make a video on it one day. But what I'm going to do is I am going to get this to -25, which is going to tell me that there's a vacuum in the system. It's a vacuum bleeder. And then what you do is you close off this valve, you open the other valve, and then it's going to fill that vacuum with our coolant that we have down here. So it makes it super quick, make sure that there's no air in your system. And yeah, it's just the best way to do it. And it's cheap, I think it was like 30 bucks on Amazon or so. But we'll have all these parts, tools, and everything else linked down below for you. So I'm not done bleeding it yet. We had it probably up to here or so, just to show you how much coolant you use. You're gonna use about a gallon or so of water and a gallon of coolant. I mean, I like to use this 5-gallon container just because I always know that I'm going to have enough. And I always start with it pretty full. So I am just about there. Okay, then take your motor cover, line it up with the oil fill location, and we're done. Really the last thing you need to do is reset the oil light. Now when you first start up a turbo, doesn't matter what brand, they will typically smoke a little bit. So if you start the car up and you see a little smoke, don't panic. If you see a lot of smoke, panic. But it is natural for some of those oils and whatnot that they use in machining to burn off. So with that, let's start it up. So what you want to do now is look for any obvious leaks or anything like that. Listen for weird noises. If you hear any weird noises, obviously just shut it down immediately. Let's see if we're starting to smoke at all here. So as promised, it is smoking. Don't worry. Listen for exhaust leaks and whatnot as well. You will, it'll basically sound like a Civic without a muffler in your engine bay. So, but just let the smoke burn off for a little while. Again, if the smoke starts to get heavy, or it's black, or whatever, use a fire extinguisher. But I don't want you to freak out when you see a little bit. All right, at this point in the process, hardware install is complete. You can drive around on a stock tune. Chris has a stage 2 tune on. For some of the cars, like the N55 has it, the S55 has it. I don't think this has it yet. But there is, if you have a boot mode license and you have access, there is a hybrid turbo map. On the B58 for the Gen 1, there's not, which is not a big deal because you could still run a stage 2 tune and be perfectly fine. Now, the best thing to do, especially if you spent the money on the turbo, is to do something like a Kerry Jordan tune, which is what we're going to be doing on this car. We're going to have a full dyno day of just this car on the dyno. So what that's really going to do is that's going to optimize it, and it's going to make sure that you get the benefits of the turbo. Otherwise, you're not really getting much. So, and we're gonna talk about that later in another video. But other than that, the only thing I need to show you was how to reset your oil light. You just hit the accessory button, foot off the brake, and then you just press and hold that little button on your odometer until it starts to say oil, and you just press and hold it again, and it's going to reset your light. Other than that, this job is done. I'm gonna give it some revs, see if we can hear some cool turbo noises, and then I'm gonna put a heat shield back on Chris's intake, and we're gonna give it back to him, and then we'll be back for more power upgrades for Chris's 340. Once again, my name is Brian, that's Zach behind the camera. Thanks for watching Kies Motorsports. If you like our videos, give us a thumbs up, make sure to subscribe, and check us out at KiesMotorsports.com. If you're looking for a turbo or other parts for your BMW, be sure to see the links down below. We have links to all the products we used in today's video, in addition to the tools. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.